this session will be split into 3 parts: Excel as a standalone tool, Excel to prepare it to import into QuickBooks or an accounting system, and Excel to clean up data that's been exported from an accounting system. So those are going to be the 3 parts. So let's dive right in and let's talk about Excel as a standalone tool. So the first thing we're going to talk about is tables and list validation. So let me open up Excel here, and I'm going to open up a brand new page from zero. And again, we're going to make the assumption that you decided that you're going to organize some accounting data in Excel. There's no accounting system. We're going to, and everything's going to be entered from scratch, right? Not going to be imported from WebBank or anything else. So typically what you do is you set up an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to zoom this in a little bit, may hopefully make it a little bit easier to read via the webinar. And then I'm going to start with my headers. So let's say my first one's going to be date. My second one's going to be, let's call it payee. My third one's going to be amount. So I'm just typing it in there, right? I'm typing amount. And then the last one's going to be memo. So that's simple. I'm going to start by just building my headers. The next thing I want to do is I want to select the data from the headers and then one more row right under it. And then I'm going to hit Control T on the keyboard, and I'm going to create a table. You want Excel to be working with an active table, because what the table does, it brings down the properties of the cells on top of it. So you don't have to be formatting and reformatting all the data as you enter more lines of data. We're going to click on this option that says my table has headers. We're going to hit that checkbox and then hit OK. So this is going to give you a table, and it'll look exactly like this. And you can change by clicking on table design. Whoops, let me close that one. By clicking on table design here in the top, you can change the formatting of that table. So if you want it to be orange, green, whatever is easier, more comfortable for you, you can use it, right? So that would be up to you which format you would like to use. So then we're going to start typing, right? Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this column has the date format. So I'm going to change that into short date. Then I wanted on the amount column, I want to change that to, let's say, accounting, right? So then essentially what I do is I just change the formatting. So now I can start typing data up. So let's say on January 1st, 2020, then I hit tab. We went to Office Depot, okay? Hit tab, and then I put the amount. Let's say it's $500. Tab, and then type printer. And then what happens is if I press enter on the very last line of printer, I'm going to hit undo for a second. So I'm in the very last column or field, and I press enter. Let me just enter. Well, it didn't do it this time because I undid it. So let me do printer and then press enter. It should create a new line for me. If it doesn't do it, just type on the next line. Notice is I don't have to deal with formatting. Let's see. I'm going to do 01, 02, 2020. And let's say we went to Chipotle, and then it was $27.80. And I'll put here with Robert, whatever it is, with Robert. Press enter, and then it will go into the next line. So what's cool about a table is Excel knows that the data ends there, and the enter will send me by default to the first field of that table. So that allows me to just quickly enter data as I go. The other things that you can do is, let's say, for example, I'm going to enter a bunch of restaurants first. So let's say we're going to do Chili's. Okay, this is $50. And then we're going to do on the 4th, let's do Panera. And it's $12.89, right? So I can just enter all my data, and then I can classify a bunch of things in one shot. Now, one thing I missed out of this table is a field for the account category. So I'm just going to insert it in here. I'm going to insert it right there. And Excel knows that table will continue to get expanded. Notice that automatically it adds a header for column 1, just because every single data field in a table needs to have a header. So we're going to put here account or category, whatever you want to call it. And then here, this is where we type office supplies, right? Let me spell that. So let's spell that correctly. So office supplies, and then down here we put meals, 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 right? Of course, some of the things that you can do if they are all the same category, let's say that all of these are supposed to be shareholder distributions, I can select them all in one shot here and then come into the edit field. So again, I selected a bunch of common ones and then I went into the edit field and I'm going to put this, let's say this is meals and entertainment. Okay, I know that's no longer a thing. Entertainment. Okay, and I can hit Control Enter on the keyboard. So combination, Control Enter. Control Enter will pre-fill all those cells in one shot. Okay, so again, I'm trying to show you sort of the practical things around Excel that could make your life easier. What's really cool about the table as well is that it's an automatic filtering mechanism. So let's say, for example, I'm going to come in here and put, let's say, February 1st, 2020, and we went to Chipotle again, and it was $78.90. And I'm going to type meals and entertainment. Okay. And basically, what's really cool about this is I can click on any of the drop-down filters here for the table. And I click on the drop-down filter, and I can maybe say, you know what? I only want to see February. So notice that you get an instant filtering mechanism with your table. So again, just to make sure that we are kind of 100% aware how this works, just in case you missed the beginning. Let's say you were starting from scratch here, and you created your headers. Then you're going to select all your headers and at least one row under it. So all the headers, one row, and hit Control T, right? And then hit checkbox and then hit OK. So what some people do is they will do one tab, let's say for each bank account. So we call it Chase 1152, and then we have BOA 1735, something like that. And then basically they'll do the data entry in multiple tabs. I personally don't recommend that. I prefer to have one big table for everything. So if you ever wanted to separate, let's say the source account, the bank account, the credit card, whatever, I'm going to delete that. And then I'm going to show you the way I would do it. The way I would do it is I'll insert a column right at the beginning, and actually not the beginning. Let me just do it right here. I'm going to do it right here and then move. I'm going to move date over to the second one. So I'm going to move date over to the second one, and I'll delete the first date. Okay. And we'll call this date. And the first one will be called source. Okay. So then this would be like the source account that you're making the expenditure from. So in here, I'll put, checking 1179, and then I'll do all my data entry for checking 1179. So I'm just gonna do a couple of copy and pasting here just to kind of speed up the process, get a little bit more data in here, just so you can see that. So as I enter all my data, I can just select the first field, hold the Shift key on my keyboard, go all the way down to the last cell. That will select the entire group. Edit, right? So I want to edit the first field while they're all selected in there. Hit Control Enter, and that will load them all in there. Okay. And you just have to be aware that anything that's an expense in this case, that would be a positive number, and anything that's income, it should be a negative number. Now you can do a debit and a credit column, but I find it much easier and better to just kind of follow that sequence. The debit is a positive and the credit is a negative. So let's say, for example, we're gonna go ahead and enter a deposit. So let's say on the 3rd, we have customer ABC deposited $5,000, and we'll put that under sales. Okay, so that's it. That's pretty simple stuff. And then the way you would then do, let's say, a profit and loss with this is you take this table, and as long as you have it set up as a table, you go into the insert tab, and then we're gonna go to pivot table. Okay, Now, one thing I noticed, I didn't put the negative sign on the deposit. So you gotta make sure I stay consistent with what I'm saying. So we do a negative sign there for the deposit. So let's go back into insert and then pivot table. So we're gonna go ahead and do a pivot table and then hit OK. And then basically this would allow me to create a report for me. So I usually will do something like account under rows and then amount under values. Okay. And that will give me sort of a quick profit and loss report. Now I do need to be aware that positives are debits and credits are negatives. If I'm gonna do it the other way, I just want to be conscious of which ones are positive and which ones are negative. Could you do debits and credits? Yes, of course you can do debits and credits, right? We'll insert a new one and we'll put here, we'll do one for expense and then income, right? If you want to do debits, credits, however you want to do it. And then you would just enter that data on each of the columns. I find that the negative and for an avid user, negative and positive is a better choice. The other thing I would strongly recommend, if you plan to build, let's say like a P&L type of report with a pivot table, is to organize your accounts with either account numbers or just with simple ordering. Like so for example, let's say I want to make all my sales ones, and then I will make all my expenses threes, and we'll make cost of goods sold twos, right? So you could do that. So I'm just gonna put a 3 at the beginning of that category there. Okay, so I'll just modify 1 and then hit Control Enter, and then we'll do this. And I'm gonna show you multiple approaches to this. So because if you don't want that number in there, and I wouldn't understand why you wouldn't want that number in there. And I'm gonna go ahead and go to pivot table, analyze up here. Okay, and then I'm gonna click on refresh so my table gets refreshed. And then I'm gonna go into my pivot table and bring in my income as a column and actually as a value. And then I'll bring my expense as a value as well. And then we have them organized in this fashion, right? And this will happen automatically because we have the number in front of each of these accounts. But I'm going to show you building a chart of accounts prior and doing the data entry with a prior chart of accounts. So let me delete that pivot table completely, and I'm just going to clear out these accounts here completely. I'm going to clear this out. Let's do clear, and then for this we'll just do debit and credit, make it a little bit more kosher. And then I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a chart of accounts that I already had in Excel. So I have that here somewhere. Let me pull that up. Okay, so let's say for example I got a chart of accounts already, right? So I already had, let's just say I had a chart of accounts already somewhere set up for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in that chart of accounts over to my blank data entry sheet. So I'll just bring that over here. Click and drag that. Okay. So now I have essentially a chart of accounts, right? So I can work a couple of ways. If I want to do account number based data entry, I can set that up, or I can do account based data entry. So I'm going to do account number based data entry, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new column here, and we're going to call it account number and then account name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Vlookup where whatever I put here under account number resolves under account name. So let's say, for example, let's do job expenses, job materials is 54300. So I'll type 54300, right? And then I want, let me change the formatting. So this is just a regular number format, and no decimals, definitely no decimals. Okay, and I want this number to resolve the account name that I already have in a chart of accounts type of sheet already. I'm going to zoom this in so it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, So that's what I want. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. Okay. So the VLOOKUP, and this is one of the most common things that people want to learn in Excel, is a VLOOKUP. First thing I want to do is I'm going to hit Control T and make my chart of accounts into a table. You will see the common theme here is that we're going to be working with tables. Hit OK, right? And then this table, okay, this table is going to have, is going to be basically a fixed table when we select it. And the way you know the table name is when you select the entire table, you will notice that this thing is called table 3. So now I will use table 3 as the array for me to do my VLOOKUP. And for VLOOKUP to work, you have to make sure that the first column is the column that we're going to do the search on. So I'm going to come back in here, and then I'm going to type a formula, which is equals VLOOKUP. Okay. And I'm going to look up this value. And notice that when you see the formulation, you see these weird characters here. It's because it's using the table reference, not using the specific the specific cell, right? Because this is gonna basically copy across the board. So we're gonna look up that in table 3. Okay, in table 3, because that's the name of the table. And then I'm gonna recall the second column because I wanted to return the second column. And then we always put false on VLOOKUP. I'm gonna go ahead and zoom this in so you can see it. This is the formula here. And the only thing that might be different from what you're used to is this thing right here, right? Where normally this would say something like E2, right? That's what we're used to seeing, E2, because it's this field. But the way tables work is when you do that formula and press enter, the formula gets copied automatically down, and it's every single time we create a line. So for example, my account for my sales, in this case, let's say we have construction income, which is 40100. I just type here 40100, press enter, and it will automatically figure out what that is for me. Let's say my office supplies. And again, this is probably more useful for people that memorized the chart of accounts. So 63000, press enter, and that will recall that that account for me. All right, I'm going to show you a different technique. I'm going to go ahead and insert a new column and delete these two, and I'm going to call this one account. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called a drop-down list, and that's called a list validation. So I'm going to select the cell that I want to work with. I'm going to click on data. So data. And then I'm going to click on where it says list validation. Okay. It's a little icon that looks like this. It's got a sort of a check mark, and then no, it's next to text to columns. If I hover over it, you see it's called data validation. So I'm going to go into data validation. This is inside the data tab. And then I'm going to tell it, look, the only thing that you can enter here, it's going to be a list, right? So it needs to be a drop-down list. And then I have the option to ignore blank, okay? And do an in-cell drop-down, which is what we want, right? So that's going to be the default setting. Then under source, I'm going to click on that button right there. So I'm going to click on this button to go find the source. Click on source, and then I switch over to this tab, and I select this column. So all I have to do is select the entire column B, and then basically I'm telling it that this is going to be a drop-down menu that only contains the account names as they're listed here. So then I'm going to press enter and then hit OK, and now I got an instant drop-down menu right here. I got an instant drop-down menu of my accounts from my chart of accounts. So I can pick the right category here and do my categorization from here, right? So I just want to make sure that that cell is all the way down, and I can pick each of the categories. So let's say this is office supplies. Okay, there are some pros and cons to this, and I'm going to explain them in a second. So office supplies. So The pro is you get the drop down menu and you get all the options. Okay. The con here is that you can't search it. So I can't come in here and type meals and hope that it'll magically find it from the list. Like I literally have to find it in the list. I can't search it. So I think that's where, maybe we're used to the way QuickBooks does the data entry, or most accounting software does the data entry, where you start typing a couple letters and it shows you something. Unfortunately, that's not a built-in function you can do in Excel. Okay, I will show you an alternative, which is kind of an interesting one. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. I'm going to click on move or copy so I can duplicate this sheet. And I'm going to show you a different technique and hit OK. So let's say this is going to be a different account. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete that column completely. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear all the data. I clear all the data here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a bunch of bogus transactions. So I'm going to do 12/31/2019, and then I'm going to take my chart of accounts and copy the entire chart of accounts here. Okay, I'm going to copy the entire chart of accounts, copy it, and I'm going to paste it in. Let me insert a new column here. Okay, hold on. Let me insert a column first, and then come in here and paste them. Not this one, sorry. This one. Okay, and I'm going to call this one account. Okay, and I'm just going to put zeros across the board for this. Just bring this all the way down with a bunch of zeros. And I'm going to bring in these dates. Okay, so I'm basically creating, let's call it one transaction per account, all for 12/31/2019. If I don't want to see them, I can just simply filter them out. So I can filter them out if I don't want to see them, right? So I want to see everything but that, I can filter them out. That's always a possibility. But what's cool about starting like this is I can scroll all the way down to my next line. So let's say I want to start doing my data entry here, and I'll do, let's say this is from checking account 1179, and I'll start typing 01/02/2020. I'll put here Chipotle. You're going to see this is pretty neat. So $25.89. And now if I come down here and I type meals, I type MEA, notice that this did like sort of an autocomplete. Okay, and this only works when the adjacent cell on top of it, the whole data set, has a list. The other thing, let's say for example, I wanted to put, let's say, insurance. Okay, so I just come in here and type INS, and sometimes it will find it quickly depending on Excel's kind of tricky when it comes to that. But you have an alternative, which is you can right click on it and click on where it says pick from drop down list. Okay, whoops, I clicked on the wrong one. Let me try this again. Right click and click on pick from drop down list. And then without me doing the data validation, it will create a temporary drop down list of all the options that are right on top of it. So you're not always stuck having to do a list validation. You can simply right click, click on pick from drop down list, and then you get a quick drop down list based on the stuff that's on top of it. And again, if you don't want to see it, all you have to do is hide it. So we can hide that one. So that way we enter something what looks like a clean thing from scratch, although the transactions are there. I mean, they are there. They're hidden for a minute, but you can still do the drop down list and have access to them. Okay, that's because, again, we didn't do a full data validation option for this. We basically just entered all the options in the top. All right. So, any questions? Go ahead and put them in the chat box. Anything that I may have missed, if I went too fast, if something didn't make sense, maybe the why I was doing it a certain way, go ahead and ask that. Okay. So we covered the VLOOKUP, and we also covered that one. So let's talk a little bit about a pivot table for a second. And I wanted to do a couple of more things when it comes to a pivot table. So I'm going to go back into my Excel spreadsheet. And then what I'll do is I'm going to do a lookup. Let me undo this for a second on hide. And I'll remove that filter. Okay. So we're going to create a new one for account number. So I'm going to call this account number. And then I'm going to go into my chart of accounts, and I'm going to create a new column called report. This is pretty cool. You'll see how this works. So I'm going to do one called report. So I added a new column called report, and then I'm going to type balance sheet for one, balance sheet, and I'm going to copy and drag that down. And then where my accounts start becoming P&L accounts, I'll put here profit and loss. So basically, I'm creating a VLOOKUP chart of accounts table. So when I'm doing my data entry, I'm going to type the account number, the account name, but I'm going to have it do a VLOOKUP on this. The only thing with VLOOKUP, the way it works is you have to have the first column as the one that you're searching. So all I have to do is cut the account number and paste it at the end, right? And then I can just delete that. Actually, let me do it again just to make sure it's not doing it wrong. And then copy and paste that in there. It needs to be within the table, otherwise it will get confused. So that's within the table. All right, so I got the account name, then I got the report, then I got the number. Let me change this to number here. So then I'm going to go back into my data sheet where I'm going to type the account name, but I want the table to resolve the account number and the report that it belongs to. So I'll also create a new one, and we'll call this one report. So I'll just do two VLOOKUPs. So we'll do VLOOKUP again. So VLOOKUP, and then the value will be the account name, and then comma, the table array will be the third column, again, because it's based on 1, 2, 3, how many columns are in my table. So I want the third column, and at the that's going to be under table 3, and then that would be third column, and then false. So I'm going to zoom this in, and this is the syntax. This is what I'm searching, which is the account name. This is where I'm searching it, which is the table array. This is the column in the table, and false means don't give me approximate, give me exact. And then I'll press enter. Okay. And I want to make sure that this is on the right format. And then I'll enter that again. Perfect. There's my VLOOKUP. So notice that all of my account names are being resolved with an account number. I'll do the same thing with report. I can just take that entire VLOOKUP formula, copy it, and then I can paste it here. But then what will change is the column number. So I wanted to return column number 2, which is the one that contains the report name. And you're going to see this is going to make a lot of sense when we do our pivot table report, okay? Because generally speaking, we are doing data entry, and we're just going to pick our account name, and then we want the account number to be used for reporting purposes. So you're going to see exactly how this works, okay? So I'm just going to put a number here, random, just to have something in here, and just going to drag this down. So we got some numbers in there, okay, just for the purposes of having something, okay? So we got something in here, and then I'm going to run a pivot table. So I'm going to go to insert pivot table, and I'll create a new pivot table, and then I can now choose what accounts I want. So for example, I can go into report here, and I'll click and drag that into filters, and I can say, look, what I really want is a profit and loss, and then I hit OK. And then I can take my account number, drag it into rows, okay, and then I can take my amount, let's say the debit amount, drag it into values, and then I can take my credit amount, drag it into values, And there we go. Let's just make sure that we have all these things are correct. We got balance sheet, and we have, okay, all these should be profit and loss. Let me just make sure that my chart of accounts is correct. Okay, so all these should be profit and loss. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go back here. Okay, that's all correct. Then I go into my my pivot table. Then I'm going to click on refresh. Okay, and then I got my profit and loss report based on a account number, and it's going to be in a profit and loss format. The other thing I can do is I can concatenate the two, and I'm gonna create one more new column, and then what I'll do is I'm gonna do a concatenate where I do equals concat. Okay, a concat is a new one. It used to be called concatenate, and then I'm gonna pick account number as the first one, and then comma. I'll do quote hyphen space quote. Okay, let me just zoom in so you can see it. Basically, I'm going to insert a space, a hyphen and a space between the account number and the account name, comma, and then account name. Close the parentheses, press enter. This is now going to show me a combined account number and account name. So we'll call this number slash name. And then with something like this, I can go back into my pivot table. I'm going to go ahead and refresh my pivot table one more time. And we're going to uncheck account number and bring in the number name as the rows. And then look, check it out. So now I got what looks a lot more like a sort of P&L type of format on a pivot table.